doll man. Man size of a doll. Hello. In the past, when I went thrifting for more true vintage, I would just be like flooded with rage if I couldn't find like a 60s dress. I'm like, there's just these plain old white button ups. And then I realized, well, if it's pretty common, pretty easy to find, or a lot of people have them in their closets, then maybe that's what I should be looking for. And it's also sort of a blank canvas. And so then I started investigating different ways to upcycle. So I thought I would show you one of my favorite new techniques. I'm calling it the lattice effect. And it has the illusion of a cutout through the midriff, but it's a lot easier to do. So let's look at the ingredients we'll need. First off, a white button-up. I would go for a boxier shape rather than a fitted with darts sort of shape. And we're going to be lengthening it, so it needs to fit comfortably over your hips. You could obviously go for whatever pattern or color you want, and it might be interesting to do sort of a color block effect. But today I'm going to do a white button-up shirt, and for our tabs, the lattice effect, I'm going to do the same kind of fabric. Maybe you could get a white button-up that you've cropped and use that fabric, or go to the fabric store and find just like a white cotton shirting. And we'll also need a ruler, a tape measure, a rotary cutter. You could also use scissors, but I think this will be a little bit easier. And this after dinner mitt, tailor's chalk, and some pins. And I think it's also helpful to have a bodkin. I'm trying on the shirt to see where I want to bifurcate it, keeping the pocket in mind, the button placement. So just so I'll remember, let me grab a pen. You could also do tailor's chalk. I'm just going to put a little pin to remind myself where I want it. And now I know where to draw the tailor's chalk. So almost all shirts seem to have this box pleat. I think that's what it's called. I could be wrong. And it tends to go sort of astray toward the middle at the bottom. So when you're cutting it, just keep that in mind. You might be cutting across that, but I mean, you can smooth it out. It's fine. Just so you know that I'm aware there's a pleat in the back. All right. So I'll try to sort of line it up a little bit. That will help with measuring. I'm trying to think if it would be easier to get a yardstick. I mean, a yardstick is a big ruler, so I didn't lie. Now I'm at the part where there's a little bit of a, I don't know if conundrum. The pocket's a bit low, then there's a button here. So then I have to think about, do I want to remove this button? And I don't know. I need to think about like the buttonhole and how that's going to finish. So, or I could sort of crop through this pocket because again, it'll be a clean finish. So that could work too. I'm just doing the math, not math, but the more like what's going to take the most, more like what's the most work for me. There's another thing we could do. We could kind of remove this entire little section. Just, I don't know, maybe that would be the easiest thing. Eliminate the entire button like it never existed. All right. I'm going to see about maybe just taking this button out. That might be the easiest thing. And just to make sure that I'm going to be cutting it straight across. No, I probably should have the shirt the other way so I could really. I think this shirt is imperfect. So I'm going to do my best. It's so annoying. Like when you're hemming pants and you just crop them off by like half an inch and you're like, wait a minute, those were uneven to begin with. So to start over. Ugh. All right, measured it. Looks fairly straight. And I think the pleat underneath is kind of you know, as flat as it can be. Instead of measure twice, cut once, I'm like, measure 37 times, and then, yeah. And then cut, and then immediately, yeah, think about cutting for 30 minutes, and then, okay. I mean, I think it'll be fine. Yeah, sure. Also could have drawn Taylor's chalk and gone across it, but, you know, let the yardstick do the work. At this point, we could also serge the end of this and then just, you know, have it go clean finish just 1/4 inch. Or maybe if you don't have a serger, you can just fold it twice and then do a straight stitch all the way around on the bottom of this shirt, the same shirt, on the bottom of this half and on the top of this half. Now we are going to make these little tabs, which will be the lattice detail. It will all make sense as we go along. When cutting these, you can use fabric from the fabric store, just some cotton. So I guess shirting is what it's called. The only thing is sometimes these are really bright white, this fabric, and then button-ups might be a little more off-white. So if that bugs you, it's really hard to pick up, I'm sure, here. But there's a bit of a difference. And it seems to be like a little, depending on the quality you get, this seems like a little bit thinner. You know, this can be a great time to utilize scraps from other button-ups if you've cropped them or reworked them. So the color and the, I know there's a word, the weight, the denier. I don't know. There's a word.
Fancy.
I know. I'm like, okay.
The weight sounds right.
The weight, the
Fabric
thickness,
weights.
the opaqueness, the opacity. So the opacity of this, the color could be a little closer match to the shirt you're working on. Or you could, you know, do a rainbow of colors or black or, you know, some sort of color block. I sound so much like my mom, like, because she was a teacher and she's like, all right, we're doing this. And I'm like, oh my God, chill out. Just to give you a little visual of what we're doing at this point, we're creating these little tabs. So here's kind of what it will end up looking like. And as far as how many tabs you want to create, I think I usually do, I want to say about 14. It really depends on the size of the shirt. If you want them really close together, like this, or if you want them, I mean, you don't want them too, you know, spaced out because then it might get a little floppy. Something else to keep in mind is the placket. Since I cut out one of the button placement is pretty like spread out in the center and I don't want it to gap. So I am going to use the button placket on this button up and just cut. I'm trying to think. I could leave a little like kind of seam allowance, I guess I could call it. And I'm really only going to need the same length as that. So I'll cut that later, but just so you see, like saving that placket, and then depending on the structure of the placket, then I can just do a little stitch to kind of hold that down. I'll really only need about that much. Now I'm going to cut the strips of fabric for the spacers. Spacer, a weird word. The tabs? Maybe tabs is a little sexier, a little more sophisticated. You hick. Okay, country mouse. In the city, we call them tabs, you know? Okay. The strips I will be cutting will be 3 inches wide and, let me just double check, 3.5 inches long. All right, let's see. Nearly right. Oh yeah, and I can also do this. I always kind of forget about that. Use that as a guide. All right. Another option, rather than just doing individual strips and tabs, you could also cut a really long tab and then cut the length you need from there. Now that you cut the strip, fold it lengthwise. We're going to be stitching along the edge, and it will, just to get a visual, it'll be like this. I'm just going to sew, I think technically this is 3/16 of an inch, but you know, about 1/4 of an inch. Now I'm going to flip the tab inside out. It helps to use a bodkin. And so I'm going to insert it in one end and then sort of like just, I don't know, jam it in the other and then close it tight. And it's always easier to flip knits, like knit fabric inside out rather than woven, but it's pretty short. So there we go. And now I just have to iron it. Now I have made the tabs. I have clean finished the top and bottom of the shirt. I've laid it flat. And now I'm going to place the tabs where I'm going to pin them down and then sew them. And I think I usually leave about 3 inches in between. So I'm going to pin those in place, and I am going to take this bit of placket from earlier and I'm going to cut it where the buttonhole is in the center, because it looks like these buttons are pretty evenly spaced from the hem. And so I'm going to cut this, but just so you can kind of see. So now we will measure 3 inches. I am kind of placing it flush with this edge. And you could serge this edge if you don't want the fraying. But I feel like somehow that's a little bit messier in the end. So, you know, again, dealer's choice. And if you want to get really fancy, I'm sure you could like make it longer, fold it under, or, you know, tuck it inside and all this stuff. But we're, you know, trying to make it semi-easy. Right. So I have spaced these 3 inches apart and try to make them as straight as possible. And when you're sewing, you can also kind of correct as you go. So the only other thing is, when you are pinning, I would say start from the front and work your way back. And then at a certain point, you might find that the measurements are just slightly off. So I think right here, I was off by just like 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to just sort of tweak these a little bit. So I'm just going to move this one over a tad and then move that one over a tad. And you can space these farther apart, closer together. You know, these can be longer. They can be, you know, you can, the world is your oyster. So yeah, this is just what I was feeling today. Okay. And move this one over a little bit. And if it's on the back, it'll be less visible anyway. So I don't even really have to move it, but I'm just going to be OCD about it. All right, and that just kind of evens it out. On the buttonhole or the button side, I put a tab, and then once I've sewn everything in place, I'm going to hand sew a button right there. So that way it'll just blend right in with that placket and you can button it. Let's come in for the close-up on the last couple here. So I am sewing either right on top of the stitch or kind of right beside it just to make sure I catch it. So of course it's gonna like mess up on the last two. All right. So I'm going to snip any threads I missed. make sure everything caught. Nothing's loose, dudes. Throwing threads around. That's all right. All right. Now I'm going to sew the button onto the butt side of the Now I'm going to sew the button onto the button side of the placket. And of course I put the button down, I've lost it. Okay. Make sure that's a different buttonhole. So let's try the right one. All right. Okay. Okay, so that's working. All right. I'm going to try it on. The origin story of this rework is I was interested in doing cutouts through the midriff of a white button-up, but then I didn't want to deal with all the finishing I have to do in the raw edges. And then when I realized I could do tabs, it's a little bit of a cheat, and I love a cheat on a rework. It's pretty easy to find a white button-up, and you're turning it into a shirt dress or a long top. And so that's kind of neat to be able to just like pop on some bike shorts and then you got an outfit. It's a little revealing, but not too revealing, like because you can layer underneath. It's still got a modern look to it, kind of clean, streamlined, and it's so versatile. And you can do so many different things with like color blocking and print blocking and change the dimensions of tabs. So I think that's one for the books. See ya. White button-ups, we all got them, or we can thrift them real easy. I'm not going to say bifurcate. I'm bifurcating it horizontally. I'm going to cut the baby down the middle. No, that sounds bad. Should I not say murderous rage?
I know.
I'm not trying to be too like Wes Anderson. I'm like winded from laughing.
I know.
Oh my God, I'm old. Okay. So and remember, we're going to be lengthening it a little bit. Remember, I'm telling you for the first time, we're going to be lengthening it. Wait, let me try it one more time.
Okay.
Clean slate. Okay. Drink water. So first up. First. Okay. Every time I get this, I'm like, should I bite into this? Sorry. I won't. But should I? It's like an after dinner mint. I'm so impressed with myself. God damn it. Turned out great. Bye. Even though it is a little labor intensive. Oh, wow. I did say that right. It was almost perfect. Bye.